Ever wondered why some people just effortlessly get social situations? They walk into a room, pick up on the vibe, say just the right thing, and navigate every interaction with a kind of invisible grace. While others, perhaps just as bright, seem to stumble, missing cues or feeling out of sync. Is it just personality, maybe a natural knack, or is there an intelligence behind this remarkable social fluency? Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into the fascinating, complex world of social intelligence. We've got a stack of cutting-edge research in front of us, specifically a deep dive into an academic dissertation that tackles this very question head-on. We'll be exploring what social intelligence truly is, the immense challenges researchers face trying to measure it, and crucially, how it relates to, or perhaps stands apart from, other forms of intelligence we're more familiar with.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is just how much has been debated about whether social intelligence is a true cognitive ability, a distinct form of smarts rather than just a collection of personality traits or learned behaviors. This deep dive will guide you through the theoretical foundations, revealing why past attempts to measure it often faltered. And then we'll dive into groundbreaking new research that aims to build a robust, scientifically sound way to assess these critical social abilities. It's kind of a scientific detective story, really, as researchers try to pin down something so inherently human and, well, fluid.
So our mission for you, our curious learner, is to cut through the academic jargon, pull out the most important insights, and give you that genuine aha moment about what truly makes someone socially intelligent. You'll walk away with a clearer picture of this elusive concept, a new appreciation for the complexity of human interaction, and perhaps a new lens through which to view your own social experiences and those around you. So we're talking about this elusive quality, social smarts. But where did the very idea of it even originate in psychological research? It's a journey that actually began much earlier than you might assume, right? Laying the groundwork for everything we're about to uncover.
Indeed. No, this isn't a newfangled concept at all. One of the earliest and most foundational mentions comes from the renowned American psychologist Edward Thorndike way back in 1920. He conceptualized it as the ability to understand and manage men and women, boys and girls, to act wisely in human relations. Think about that for a moment. Acting wisely in human relations. It's not just about knowing facts, is it? It's about navigating the messy, unpredictable world of people. And this immediately raises an important question. How does it differ from what we typically think of as traditional academic intelligence? The kind we test in schools.
That's a crucial distinction, yeah. When we think of intelligence, our minds often default to G, the general intelligence factor, which is what traditional IQ tests try to measure. We picture someone who excels at abstract reasoning, verbal fluency, or complex problem-solving in a textbook. But Thorndike, a century ago, was already hinting at something beyond that, something more, intrinsically human, something about interacting with other consciousnesses.
Precisely. Academic intelligence is typically defined as a cognitive performance construct, dealing with abstract problems and tasks that are often independent of specific social contexts. Imagine solving a complex differential equation or understanding a nuanced historical event. The correct answer exists regardless of who you're talking to. The problem itself is static. Social intelligence, on the other hand, deals fundamentally with dynamic, often ambiguous behavioral information, frequently conveyed through subtle nonverbal cues like a fleeting expression, a shift in posture, or the unspoken rhythm of a conversation. It's about navigating the fluid, often ambiguous world of human interaction where the rules are constantly changing.
Okay, and what happened next in this historical journey is particularly telling, isn't it? For a while, social intelligence sort of flew under the radar. It was there, a quiet foundational concept, but it didn't ignite a huge research frenzy. But then, in the 1990s, a new concept burst onto the scene and completely took over the spotlight. Emotional intelligence. It just exploded onto the popular consciousness and the academic world alike.
Oh, the sheer scale of this shift is remarkable, and it profoundly shaped the landscape of intelligence research. According to the PsycInfo database, the number of scientific publications on emotional intelligence exploded from just 6 between 1990 and 1994 to an astonishing 1,055 between 2000 and 2006.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. And in stark contrast, social intelligence publications didn't see a comparable boom. In fact, about 16% of its articles during that time even appeared within the context of emotional intelligence research. This indicates a significant, almost overwhelming shift in research focus, where the younger, maybe more charismatic sibling effectively overshadowed social intelligence, absorbing much of its domain.
So it's fascinating how much attention emotional intelligence garnered. But it raises a tough question that critics often posed. Was it truly a revolutionary concept? Or, as some argued, simply a clever repackaging of ideas that were already out there? Maybe even social intelligence itself, just with a more appealing, marketable name.
That's a critical point, and one that fueled considerable debate within the scientific community. Some criticisms indeed argued that emotional intelligence simply incorporated older, well-established constructs like alexithymia, which is the difficulty identifying and describing one's own emotions, or emotional regulation, or even aspects of social intelligence itself, just under a new, perhaps more fashionable moniker. This debate highlighted a fundamental challenge in psychology. What are the rigorous requirements for establishing any new intelligence construct as genuinely distinct and scientifically valid? The sources highlight several stringent criteria that researchers demand. First, there needs to be clear theory formation. This isn't just a vague idea, it's like an architect's blueprint. It requires specifying exactly where the new construct fits within the broader sphere of individual differences, how it relates to existing abilities, and how it manifests in behavior. It needs coherence.
Okay, so solid foundation.
Exactly. Second, there must be clear and non-redundant terminology for construct specification. You can't just slap a new label on an old concept and call it new. It needs its own unique, defined space. Third, the construct definition needs to be based on empirical results. This means concrete evidence from studies proving its existence and distinctiveness, not just logical argument. You need to show it in action.
Right, gotta have the proof.
Yeah.
And crucially, you need sound, scientifically robust ways to measure it. Otherwise, it's just a theoretical idea floating out there, isn't it?
Precisely. The research emphasizes psychometrically sound operationalizations. This essentially means developing diagnostic instruments that are built like finely tuned scientific instruments. They must be reliable, meaning they consistently measure what they claim to, and valid, meaning they truly measure what they're supposed to measure. And Seuss back in 2001 further demanded the application of true performance tests, where there's a demonstrable correct answer, not just subjective self-reports. This avoids the problem of people simply rating how socially adept they think they are, which, as we'll see, may not align with actual ability.
That makes sense.
And controversially, some researchers argue for positive correlations with G as a necessary condition for any new intelligence construct, suggesting everything ultimately funnels back to general intelligence. However, the paper we're delving into argues against this as a necessary condition, prioritizing the other criteria, which opens up the possibility for truly distinct forms of intelligence that don't just reduce to book smarts.
Interesting. So maybe G isn't the be-all and end-all. So with those foundational requirements in mind, let's zoom in on some of the major theoretical models that have attempted to map out how intelligence is structured, especially when we talk about these elusive social abilities. It's clear now that we're not just talking about a single brain-size number anymore, are we? We're talking about a multi-dimensional mental landscape.
No, not at all. The landscape is far more intricate. The first truly comprehensive theory to explicitly include social intelligence as a distinct component was Guilford's structure of intellect, SOI model, proposed in 1967. Imagine intelligence not as a single line, but as a 3D cube.
Okay, a cube.
Yeah, this cube has three primary dimensions: contents, which are the types of information we process; products, which are the forms the information takes after processing; and operations, which are the mental processes we apply. So you might have figural content, like images; symbolic content, like numbers or letters; semantic content, words and meanings; and crucially for us, behavioral content.
A cube. I like that. So if I'm picturing this right, Guilford's suggesting social intelligence isn't a separate kind of smarts that uses different brain machinery, but rather are regular cognitive operations, things like memory, problem solving, evaluation applied to a different kind of information, human behavior. Does that imply it's not truly distinct from general intelligence, or is there more to this content difference than meets the eye?
That's a perceptive question, and it's precisely the nuance in Guilford's model. Social intelligence, for Guilford, was situated within the behavioral content domain of the SOI model. This was positioned alongside other contents like figural, symbolic, and semantic. The implication was that social intelligence, according to Guilford, only differed from general intelligence in the type of information being processed, not necessarily in the underlying cognitive operations. In his view, you were still using the same mental tools, cognition, memory, divergent production, evaluation, but applying them to decode human behavior. For testing, he mainly relied on pictorial material, focusing on nonverbal cues and the substance or meaning of behavioral information, stressing its importance over the mere form of stimulus presentation. So it wasn't just how you saw something, but what that visual cue meant in a social context that mattered. It was a step towards recognizing the unique nature of social information, even if the processing mechanisms were seen as universal.
So it's about understanding thoughts, desires, feelings, moods, emotions, intentions, and actions conveyed through behavior, whether it's someone else's or even our own internal states. That sounds incredibly relevant for navigating real life, far beyond what a typical academic IQ test might capture. It's like having a specialized decoder ring for human interactions.
Absolutely. It's fundamentally about decoding the complex human element in real time. Moving forward, another significant model, particularly influential in German research, is the Berlin Intelligence Structure, BIS model, developed by Jaeger in 1982. Contrary to some other theories that might try to consolidate everything into a single factor, the BIS model applies the idea of a faceted model of intelligence, providing a more nuanced view of intellectual abilities. It's like looking at intelligence through a multi-layered prism rather than a single lens.
Okay, so BIS is like a multi-layered diamond of intelligence, where G is at the top, representing our overall mental horsepower. And then you have these different ways of being smart, each with its own specific facets or cutting edges.
That's a great analogy. It proposes a general factor G at the highest level, reflecting overall intellectual capacity, and then seven second-order factors that belong to two distinct facets. You have an operational facet, which describes how we think, consisting of four cognitive operations: reasoning, creativity, memory, and speed.
Right.
And then there's a content facet, which describes what we think about: figural, like spatial puzzles, verbal, language-based tasks, and numerical mathematical problems. So for example, you could have verbal reasoning or figural speed. It's a comprehensive framework for understanding how different mental processes interact with different types of information.
This leads us directly to the heart of the research we're deep diving into today, the Modified Performance Model of Social Intelligence by Weiss and Seuss from 2005. This is where they really tried to map out what social intelligence looks like in terms of measurable cognitive abilities.
Indeed. This model specifically identifies four core cognitive ability domains of social intelligence as part of a performance model. These are social understanding, social memory, social perception, and social creativity. It's a pragmatic approach, focusing on what can be observed and measured as a cognitive skill. The model also acknowledges the relevance of social knowledge for social behavior within a broader framework of social competences, but importantly, it treats it separately.
Why separately?
Well, because social knowledge, like knowing proper etiquette for a diplomatic dinner or understanding specific cultural norms, is often too context and situation specific and too influenced by learning and culture to be considered a general cognitive ability in the same way that understanding emotions or remembering faces might be across different situations.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. It's learned, not innate ability, maybe.
Exactly. More learned and context bound.
Okay, let's unpack these four core abilities in their model then, because they form the foundation of their measurement efforts. So first, social understanding. This requires individuals to interpret social stimuli, things like a subtle facial expression, a nuanced tone of voice, or a complex group interaction to accurately conclude a person's emotions, thoughts, intentions, or personality traits. It's about figuring out what's going on beneath the surface, connecting the dots.
Reading the situation.
Then, social memory. This involves storing and recalling objectively given social information. This could be anything from remembering names and faces to recalling specific details from past social situations, like who said what at a meeting or the sequence of events at a party. It's about having a rich mental database of social facts.
Remembering the who, what, when of social interactions.
Next, social perception. This is about quickly and accurately perceiving socially relevant information. This could be identifying a specific person within a crowded photo, noticing subtle shifts in eye contact in a video clip, or rapidly detecting a specific nonverbal cue, like a gesture of agreement. It's about speed and precision in picking up signals.
Catching those fleeting cues.
Finally, social creativity. This involves generating novel and appropriate responses in social situations. This is where you think on your feet, coming up with unique yet effective solutions to complex or ambiguous social challenges, like diffusing tension in a room or finding a diplomatic way to disagree.
Yeah, thinking outside the box, socially. That's an excellent summary. The crucial conceptual overlap with models like the BIS is clear. Social intelligence also involves operative domains like reasoning, as in understanding, memory, and perception, which relates to processing speed. And it deals with specific content components like verbal, spoken, or written language, and nonverbal picture and video-based information. However, numerical content is notably missing in social intelligence, as it's not directly relevant to social interaction in the same way. Additionally, pure auditory content, such as tone of voice independent of words, was not fully incorporated into the BIS model at the time of this research, which points to an area where general intelligence models might need to broaden their scope when it comes to social cues. This raises an important question that this dissertation directly grapples with. Just how separate are these different intelligences, or do they ultimately subsume under one general factor, like G?
Right. Is social intelligence truly its own independent pillar of human capability? That's the big question. So we've discussed how social intelligence has a long history and how it's being mapped out. But now, let's dive into that younger sibling we mentioned earlier, the one that famously exploded in research. Emotional intelligence. How does it truly fit into the broader picture of social intelligence? Are they two sides of the same coin, or distinct entities that just happen to hang out together sometimes?
This is a key area of discussion in the sources. Yeah, as the boundaries between these concepts have often been blurry, causing considerable academic debate. The most prominent model for emotional intelligence, and the one that garnered so much public attention, is Mayer and Celebi's four-branch model from 1997. It's a hierarchical model, meaning it posits that its four proposed branches build upon each other, leading to a more comprehensive understanding of emotional intelligence.
Okay, four branches. What are they?
So the first branch is perceiving and expressing emotion. This is the foundational ability to accurately identify emotions in oneself and others by looking at faces, listening to voices, observing postures, or even analyzing cultural artifacts like music or art. It also includes the ability to express one's own emotions clearly and appropriately. Think of it as the emotional equivalent of being able to read and write.
Got it. Basic decoding and encoding.
Right. Second, we have assimilating emotions in thought. This refers to the capacity to use emotions to facilitate thinking. For example, a shift in your mood might help you prioritize tasks, focusing your attention where it's most needed. Or you might intentionally generate a certain emotion to help you approach a problem from a different perspective. It's about leveraging your emotional state as a cognitive tool.
Using feelings to help thinking. Interesting.
Then the third branch is understanding emotions. This goes beyond mere perception to a deeper cognitive grasp. It's about knowing what causes emotions, how they combine, and how they transition. The source gives a great example, understanding that Johnny felt frustration and discontent, then thought about the future and began to feel excited. This branch is about the sophisticated knowledge of emotional dynamics, knowing that anger can lead to regret or excitement can lead to nervousness.
So knowing the why and how of emotions.
Exactly. And finally, the fourth branch is reflectively regulating emotions. This is the highest level, involving the strategic management of emotions in oneself and others to promote intellectual and emotional growth. An example provided is rating the effectiveness of actions to help someone fall asleep when they can't stop thinking about bad things. It's about being able to calm yourself down, inspire others, or skillfully navigate emotional conflicts for positive outcomes.
Okay, so managing emotions effectively in yourself and others. So emotional intelligence isn't just about having emotions, but about understanding and using them smartly, almost like a specialized cognitive tool to navigate your internal world and influence your interactions. What about Scherer's model, which also gets a mention in the sources? How does that compare, and does it shed more light on the social-emotional connection?
Yeah, Scherer's model of emotional competence from 2007 offers another theory-driven approach, and notably, it critiques some existing ability models, including aspects of Mayer and Salavi's, suggesting they might be too broad. Scherer focuses on perception competence as accurate signal perception and recognition, specifically directed at the perception and interpretation of emotions in others. This is very similar to Mayer and Salavi's first branch, emphasizing the ability to read emotional cues. However, production competence in Scherer's model refers to flexible emotional communication and social interaction through appropriate expression of one's own state. This includes the appraisal and regulation of emotions in oneself, providing a more holistic view of how we manage and convey our own emotional states effectively in social settings. It's about the give and take of emotional expression.
Okay, let's unpack this with all these detailed models in mind. Given the emphasis on emotions in both, how much do social and emotional intelligence actually overlap? Are they essentially measuring the same underlying thing with different labels? Or are they truly distinct entities that simply happen to interact in complex ways?
Well, the sources indicate significant conceptual overlap, particularly in the domain of perception of emotion. This aligns clearly with Branchant's of Mayer and Salavy's model and Scherer's perception competence. Both social and emotional intelligence undeniably deal with deciphering social cues, especially those related to feelings. However, the research suggests that social intelligence, as conceptualized in the Weiss and Suess model, the one we're really digging into, seems to be the broader construct in terms of the modalities covered. Social intelligence includes not only emotions, but also cognitions, intentions, relationships, and personality traits. Emotional intelligence, on the other hand, is generally restricted to emotional contents.
Ah, so SI is wider.
Seems that way. What's more, emotional intelligence specifically branches the second, assimilating emotions and thought, and four, reflectively regulating emotions, seems to reach beyond the direct scope of social intelligence. These branches focus on how emotions facilitate thought or how we manage them internally and externally for personal growth, which are more about interpersonal processes and their cognitive utility than purely interpreting social cues from others. So you could think of social intelligence as the entire social landscape, and emotional intelligence as a specific, incredibly important mountain range within that landscape, distinct but undeniably part of the bigger picture.
That clarifies the relationship beautifully. And beyond these two, what about practical intelligence or even the elusive concept of wisdom? Do those play a role in this complex landscape of human abilities? And how do they relate to our social smarts?
They absolutely do, as they represent other critical attempts to capture intelligence beyond the traditional academic definition. Practical intelligence, for instance, is often equated with tacit knowledge. This isn't the kind of knowledge you learn from a textbook, it's acquired through experience, often implicitly. It's all about problem solving in everyday, real-world contexts, which are distinct from the abstract, well-defined problems found in academic settings.
Like street smarts.
Kind of, yeah. The sources mention the Tacit Knowledge Inventory for Managers, TKM, as an example, which measures job-related knowledge specific to occupational fields like knowing the unwritten rules of an office or the unspoken shortcuts to getting things done. What's particularly notable is that tacit knowledge has shown to be only marginally related to academic intelligence and personality, suggesting it's a unique skill set gained through practical immersion.
So it's about knowing the unspoken rules and shortcuts for navigating specific situations, like managing a team effectively without being explicitly told how, or knowing proper etiquette at a dinner with your supervisor without needing a training manual. It's the kind of knowledge that makes you truly effective in a specific domain.
Precisely. It's the know-how of navigating specific domains effectively. And then there's wisdom, particularly conceptualized by the Berlin wisdom paradigm. This paradigm defines wisdom as highly valued and outstanding expertise in dealing with fundamental, i.e. existential problems related to the meaning and conduct of life.
Wow, that sounds deep.
It is a very grand definition, yeah, encompassing deep knowledge about human nature, the life course, and uncertainty. It's about profound insights into life's biggest, most complex questions like how to cope with loss, find meaning, or make difficult moral decisions. It's a long-term reflective capacity.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources discuss whether social intelligence is more specific than wisdom, dealing with everyday, common problems that arise frequently, while wisdom handles fundamental, serious life problems that rarely occur. This again highlights the ongoing debate about how to delineate these different aspects of human intelligence and where their boundaries truly lie. The sheer complexity of defining and differentiating these constructs and then figuring out how they work together is a central theme in this research. It's like trying to draw clear lines on a constantly shifting map.
Exactly. It's a fascinating puzzle.
So, after laying out this rich theoretical landscape of what social intelligence might be, we hit the bedrock challenge. How do you actually capture something so fluid, so nuanced, and so context-dependent as social intelligence? It sounds incredibly difficult, especially when you consider that traditional IQ tests rely on clear right and wrong answers, like a math problem. This brings us to what might be the trickiest part of this whole scientific endeavor, the art and science of measuring social smarts. And as you'll hear, it's been quite a bumpy road for researchers trying to nail this down.
Oh, it is indeed a significant challenge, and past attempts have faced considerable methodological issues, often leading to measures that fail to adequately capture the construct or suffered from significant validity problems. The sources review several approaches that have been tried and their inherent pitfalls. First, there's the implicit theory approach. This method essentially involves asking everyday people, laypersons, what they believe constitutes social intelligence. Researchers collect these common beliefs and try to identify underlying behaviors or traits.
So like crowdsourcing the definition.
Kind of, yeah. For example, Kosmitsky and John in 1993 asked people to describe socially intelligent individuals and extracted factors like social intelligence, which included understanding people, social insight, perspective taking, social influence, and social memory. However, these approaches almost invariably lead to self-report measures where individuals rate their own perceived abilities. The fundamental issue here is that self-reports struggle to prove convergent construct validity with actual objective performance. It's like asking someone if they're a good driver. They'll probably say yes, but the real test is how they perform on the road, not what they think they can do.
Right, what you think versus what you actually do.
Right. Exactly. Next, we have more straightforward self-report inventories. These are questionnaires where individuals rate their own social behaviors or skills, like the Social Skills Inventory, SSI. You simply check boxes or rate yourself on a scale. The fundamental issue remains the lack of objective performance data. Responses are often influenced by method-related variance, meaning how people answer might reflect their self-perception, their desire to present themselves positively, or simply their reporting style more than their actual social ability. It's a measure of self-perception, not actual social performance. You might think you're great at reading a room, but can you actually do it consistently?
Okay, so self-reports are tricky. What else?
Finally, behavioral observations. This involves directly observing people in real or simulated social situations and having trained raters score their socially intelligent behavior. The source gives an example of doctors interviewing patients where their social intelligence might be rated on dimensions like introduction, seeking information, or effect and support. While this approach undeniably meets Thorndike's original genuineness requirement of real-life interaction, you're seeing it happen. It's incredibly time and resource consuming.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and such observations are often artificial, restricted to specific settings like a structured interview, and very difficult to generalize beyond those particular situations. It's almost impossible to use for large-scale research or assessment because group testing is rarely possible.
So it sounds like while there have been many attempts, the ultimate goal has always been to create a cognitive ability test for social intelligence, something with objective answers, much like an IQ test for academic skills. But even that, it seems, has its own unique set of problems to overcome, making it a truly formidable scientific puzzle.
Absolutely. The research highlights several deeply embedded methodological challenges in designing such rigorous objective tests for social abilities, which really underscores why this area has been so difficult for psychology. One major challenge is item origin. Many early tests used artificially produced or posed item material.
Like actors pretending.
Exactly. Or verbal descriptions of emotions, static painted faces showing a single emotion, or even simplified computer animated faces, rather than genuine interactions from real people. The crucial question here is the ecological validity of such material in reflecting the richness and complexity of real-life social situations. A posed smile is very different from a genuine, fleeting expression of amusement, right?
Totally different.
The source explicitly notes that sampling genuine material from real persons using camcorders, voice recorders, and photo cameras is far more effortful, requiring extensive editing to make it suitable as a test item. But this effort is seen as absolutely necessary for capturing the nuances of authentic human behavior.
Makes sense. You need the real deal.
Yeah.
What else?
Then there's context information. Unlike academic intelligence, which often deals with decontextualized problems, social intelligence is highly context-dependent. For instance, judging irony requires knowing that a person is not satisfied with circumstances they cannot change, which implies a specific situational understanding. Without that context, a sarcastic comment might be misinterpreted as literal. Many existing tests either completely lack context, have only one type of context, or include heterogeneous context without proper taxonomic foundations, making it hard to interpret results. This implies a critical need for within-person, domain-sensitive flexibility in social intelligence assessment.
So the situation matters a lot.
Hugely. The choice of item and response formats also profoundly influences results. Possible formats include forced choice formats like standard multiple choice questions and ratings-based scales where you rate a mental state on, say, a 1 to 5 scale. Ratings-based scales play a prominent role in emotional intelligence testing, like the MSCEI, and also in situational judgment tests. A significant issue highlighted is that early social intelligence tests using traditional forced choice formats showed an unwantedly large overlap with academic intelligence tests,
Why was that?
simply due to sharing similar format characteristics, making it hard to distinguish the two constructs. It became less about social ability and more about, say, verbal reasoning needed to understand the multiple choice options.
Ah, okay. The format itself got in the way.
Precisely. Finally, scoring procedures are particularly complex for social intelligence. How do you objectively score a correct social response when human interaction is so subjective and multi-layered? The paper discusses three main methods, each with its own significant drawbacks. One is target scoring. Here, the target person's own reported mental state serves as the criterion for correctness.
So what the person in the video says they felt.
Exactly. But this is problematic due to potential biases. Targets might mislabel their own complex feelings or report socially desirable intentions rather than their true state. Study found that while targets were more accurate judging their own emotional experiences, peers were actually more accurate rating behavioral indicators related to personality traits. So self-report isn't always the gold standard.
Interesting. Okay, what's the second way?
Group consensus scoring. This method deems the most frequent response from a large sample of judges is correct. If 80% say sadness, then sadness is correct. The challenge here is when there's no strong consensus. The source notes that for musical excerpts used in some tests, reliability using this method was unacceptably low, suggesting no commonly agreed upon criterion among test takers for those stimuli. If the crowd doesn't agree, what's correct?
Right. Mob rule isn't always right. And the third?
Expert consensus scoring. A panel of highly experienced experts determines the correct answer. The sources mention that this method, along with group consensus, allows for a broader range of item material beyond simply judging a target's mental state. However, even experts can sometimes disagree, or their interpretations might be influenced by their own biases.
So no perfect scoring method either, it seems. When you put all that together, the artificial stimuli, the lack of context, the format issues, and the scoring dilemmas, the research paints a pretty critical picture of existing social and emotional intelligence measures, indicating that many haven't quite hit the mark for true, objective assessment. It's like trying to measure the wind with a ruler.
Indeed. A critical summary of existing tests points to several pervasive issues. First, a fundamental lack of reference to clear theoretical models and widespread conceptual confusion. Different tests often use the same underlying constructs but apply diverse, confusing labels, or identical labels sometimes assess entirely different constructs. It's a mess.
A tangled web.
Yeah. Second, there's an unsystematic application of measurement approaches. A striking example is the heavy reliance on written language in many tests. Yet, as Morabian and Ferris found way back, only about 7% of communicative cues are transmitted over language content, while 93% rely on auditory and visual channels.
Wow, 93%.
Huge disconnect, right? Furthermore, those artificial or posed task materials are just inadequate substitutes for real social situations. Finally, there's weak evidence for convergent construct validity, meaning tests often don't correlate well with other measures they should relate to. And ironically, they sometimes show high, unwanted correlations with verbal academic intelligence. Even existing emotional intelligence tests, like the MSCEI, have struggled to prove both divergent and convergent validity. This all underscores the urgent need for a more scientifically rigorous approach. Which brings us to the core of the dissertation we're exploring.
So against this formidable backdrop of significant challenges and methodological shortcomings, the researchers whose work we're deep diving into embarked on their own ambitious project to develop a new, robust test battery for social intelligence called the Social Intelligence Measure, or FIM. What was their game plan to overcome these hurdles and truly capture these elusive social smarts?
Their core aim was nothing less than to create a multidimensional cognitive performance construct for social intelligence, explicitly designed to address every identified shortcoming of previous tests. They emphasized two key principles. First, focusing only on cognitive requirements, with a minimum amount of general knowledge being necessary. This ensures their measuring ability, not just learned facts. Second, they plan to systematically vary the task material, what they called contents, in an MTMM multi-trait, multi-method design.
MTMM. Sounds technical.
It is a bit, but it's crucial. It allows them to control for method-related variance, meaning they could ensure that any observed correlations truly reflected underlying abilities rather than just similarities in how the tests were formatted. Think of it like a chef wanting to know if a dish's flavor comes from the main ingredient or just the cooking method. MTMM allows them to isolate the ingredient, the ability, from the method, the task format.
Okay, isolating the core ability. So what did that MPMM design look like in practice for SIM? How did they build this complex matrix of social abilities?
It meant meticulously building tasks that systematically varied across two critical dimensions, operations and contents, to fit a comprehensive matrix. For operations, they aimed to measure social understanding, SU, social memory, SM, social perception, SP, and social creativity, SC. Though social creativity wasn't fully developed in the main studies.
Right.
For contents or task material, they deliberately use a range of formats. Written language, V, spoken language, A, static pictures, P, and dynamic videos, F. The brilliance of this approach was to create distinct cells within this matrix. For example, they could have a task for social understanding using video material, SU, or a social memory task using written language, SMV. This allowed them to rigorously test if these different operations were truly separate abilities across different types of social information, minimizing the chance that they were just measuring the same thing in different disguises.
And here's where their dedication truly sets this research apart, isn't it? They went all out for genuineness in their source material. It sounds like they basically embedded themselves in people's lives to get this raw material.
Yes, absolutely. A hallmark of SIM was its unwavering commitment to using genuine situations and real persons as targets. This was a radical departure from the artificial or posed stimuli common in older tests. The researchers recruited friends, family, and acquaintances of their research group. They accompanied these individuals for periods ranging from a few hours to 2 full days, observing them in both private and public situations.
Wow.
Yeah, recording them extensively using digital camcorders, voice recorders, and photo cameras. The explicit goal was to capture natural, unscripted behavior. They noted that targets get used to the fact that they are being observed after a certain time, allowing for more authentic data. This intensive effort highlights their dedication to capturing real-world social interaction.
That's incredible. So they were essentially living alongside these people to collect data, turning everyday life into a scientific laboratory. What kind of specific social intelligence tasks did this wealth of genuine, authentic material enable them to create for the SIM battery?
This rich, authentic material allowed for really ecologically valid and engaging tasks. First, the social understanding tasks, SU. These were scenario-based, centered around individual target persons like Christoph, Katharina, etc. In Study 2, they added 4 more, totaling 8 targets for diversity.
Okay.
Participants got minimal background info, then watched video clips of the target introducing themselves and in various social situations like Christoph and his girlfriend going swimming or Katharina having a difficult conversation. After viewing a scene, participants had to judge the target's emotions, thoughts, intentions, motivations, or personality traits using 7-point rating scales, for instance. How strongly is anger present? Or how strongly does the target agree with these thoughts? Crucially, instructions primed test takers to focus on relevant cues. It was about deep interpretation.
So really getting inside the target's head based on real behavior.
Exactly. Second, for social memory tasks, SM, subjects had to watch, read, or listen to social extracts and then answer multiple choice or open-ended questions about socially relevant details. Objective facts. Examples included reproducing info from written correspondences, SMV, recalling facts from spoken recordings, SMA, or remembering details about couples in pictures, SMP1, or actions in videos, SMF. The emphasis was on objective recall.
Remembering the social details accurately.
Right. Third, social perception tasks, SP, focused on the quick and accurate identification of objectively present social cues. Targets could be persons, relevant language, or complex interactions. For instance, participants might hear a conversation and react quickly when agreement is expressed, or see crowd pictures and detect a target person. Performance was scored primarily in terms of reaction time for correct responses, emphasizing speed and accuracy.
Picking up signals fast. That's an incredibly rich and varied battery of tests. And they didn't just stop at developing the test. They ran 2 main studies to refine and validate this ambitious SIM battery. What did those studies look like?
Yes, 2 instrumental studies. Study 1 involved 126 German university students. This initial study used 4 targets and was primarily focused on initial test development, psychometrics, and early construct validity. Kind of an exploratory phase.
Testing the waters.
Exactly. Study 2 was much larger, with 182 unselected adults, deliberately heterogeneous in age, education, and occupation for better generalizability. It built on Study 1, adding 4 more scenario targets for more heterogeneity. Significant technical improvements were also implemented, using an experimental program for fixed presentation and response times, standardizing conditions. They even had to cleverly work around a software limitation where video and audio couldn't play simultaneously for self-presentations, using separate screens and speakers. A real commitment to getting it right.
Really rigorous work.
Yeah.
So after all that meticulous data collection and painstaking test development with real people in real situations, what did the researchers actually find about social intelligence and their new SIM battery? Did it hold up? Did it work?
While the results were indeed illuminating, and as is often the case in complex research, they sometimes presented new challenges and revealed unexpected complexities. Let's start with the psychometric properties. Research question 1A, basically, does the test measure reliably? Initially, in study 1, the tasks showed varying reliability. For social understanding, many items had to be excluded because they didn't correlate well with others in the same category, like 52 items down to 27 for written language. They built reliable scales, but the pictorial tasks struggled.
So some initial teething problems.
Definitely. In study 2, after modifications, they got more reliable scales for social understanding. However, even then, more than half the items were still excluded to achieve consistency. This led the researchers to question if traditional tools like Chromax Alpha are fully appropriate for tasks with such heterogeneous, real-world elements. Maybe we need new ways to assess reliability for this kind of complex data.
Interesting point. What about the structure? How does social intelligence look?
Right, the structure of social intelligence. Research question 2A. Study 1 found initial support for a 3-factor model: social understanding, social memory, and social perception as correlated factors, loading onto a higher-order general factor of social intelligence. It looked hierarchical.
Like one big SI factor on top.
That was the initial picture. However, study 2 brought a twist. The correlation between social understanding and social memory was substantially smaller, tiny, actually, R.069, compared to R.35 before.
Well, that's a big drop.
Huge. It raised serious doubts about a single higher-order social intelligence factor. Instead, study 2 found stronger evidence for a faceted structure with 2 main facets: operations, understanding and memory, and contents, language-based versus language-free materials. This implies social intelligence might be better understood not as one general ability, but as different abilities operating on different types of social information. Less like one master key, more like a Swiss Army knife.
Okay, a more complex structure then. But what about validity? Did it measure what it was supposed to, and was it distinct from academic smarts?
Crucial questions. So, construct validity. Research questions 2B and 2C. Divergent validity from academic intelligence was consistently supported across both studies. This is a major finding. Social intelligence, via SIM, was structurally independent from academic intelligence, measured by the BIS test. Correlations were generally low.
So social smarts are really different from book smarts.
The data strongly suggest yes, they are distinct constructs. For convergent validity with nonverbal sensitivity, they used the PNS test. But the research could not prove SIM converged with PNS. However, the PNS itself has reliability issues in other studies, so this wasn't seen as a major knock against SIM.
Okay, maybe the PNS wasn't the best comparison.
Possibly. And other divergent validity checks showed self-report measures of social skills and emotional intelligence had only marginal or non-significant correlations with SIM's performance tasks. This confirms that thinking you're socially skilled doesn't necessarily mean you are, based on objective performance.
Self-perception versus reality again. What about gender differences?
Gender differences. Research question 3B. Study 1 found some differences favoring women in social understanding, aligning with some prior literature. However, Study 2 contradicted this, finding no significant overall gender differences in SIM tasks. Interestingly, it did show performance could be influenced by the target's gender. For example, test takers found male targets slightly easier to judge. This highlights the complexity and the need for many diverse targets to avoid biases.
Fascinating. And the scoring. Any insights there?
Yes, scoring insights, research question 3C, were revealing. The research showed item difficulty significantly impacts the relationship between target scoring, target's own answer, and group consensus scoring. When items were easy and the target and group agreed, the methods correlated highly. But when items were hard and the target's answer differed from the group's most common answer, the correlation dropped. It shows how subjective correctness can be when things get ambiguous.
So agreement breaks down on tricky items.
Exactly. They also explored correlations-based scoring, but it showed very low reliability and wasn't a good alternative.
Okay. Lastly, how did people actually process the information in the tasks?
Processes. During social understanding tasks, research question 3F, looked at bottom-up, cue-driven versus top-down, knowledge-driven processing. The results were mixed. Performance didn't systematically increase over a scenario, which would suggest top-down knowledge building, except in one case. Correlations with memory for task details were low but significant, suggesting some bottom-up perception was involved. But correlations with memory for background info were weak, suggesting subjects didn't heavily rely on pre-existing knowledge or stereotypes. It seems the sim tasks successfully focused participants on interpreting the immediate cues presented.
So mostly relying on the here and now of the interaction. So the sim battery represents a huge, ambitious step forward in measuring social intelligence with its commitment to genuine situations and robust methodological efforts. It's really a blueprint for the future. But what's next? Where do the researchers suggest we go from here to build on this groundbreaking work and continue to refine our understanding of social smarts?
Yeah, the dissertation outlines several critical future perspectives and test modifications that are essential. It's a candid look at the road ahead. First, technical improvements are crucial. Overcoming limitations like not being able to present combined audio and video information simultaneously. Real life is multimodal, right?
Absolutely. We see and hear at the same time.
Exactly. And improving picture quality. Addressing these would enhance the genuineness and real-life fidelity even further. Second, reducing test length. The current tasks take about 3 hours. That's just totally unrealistic for broad applications.
That's right. Yeah, that's a lot.
Right. They suggest selecting items based on psychometrics or excluding entire scenarios. The challenge is reducing length without losing the richness. It's a tricky balance. Third, refining scoring procedures. More investigation into target scoring objectivity is needed. The way continuous target answers are converted to discrete ratings can cause issues. They suggest obtaining expert ratings and documenting relevant cues to create a more objective scoring schema, moving beyond just the target's self-report or group consensus, building a better answer key.
More objective benchmarks.
Precisely. Fourth, enhancing target heterogeneity. The research consistently found using as diverse and as many targets as possible is vital to avoid idiosyncratic effects of individual targets, like their sending accuracy or test taker biases. This creates tension with reducing test length, but maybe varying elements across scenarios rather than within them is a compromise.
Wear the diversity out.
Kind of, yeah. Finally, for a deeper process investigation, future research should actively manipulate conditions to study how bottom-up versus top-down processing occurs. Maybe limit time or vary cues and background info to see how people prioritize. Understanding the cognitive engine.
Getting under the hood of social thinking. This raises an important question. Does this framework, with its current focus on understanding, memory, and perception, have room for social creativity or social knowledge as full-fledged ability domains? Or are they considered separate for good reason?
That's a great point. The current sim focuses on understanding, memory, and perception as the core performance model based on what was most robustly measurable. Social creativity was part of the original model but wasn't fully developed here. Future tasks might involve open-ended responses to social problems, scored for quantity and diversity of solutions. It's thought to be related more to social understanding.
Makes sense. And social knowledge.
Social knowledge was explicitly excluded from the core model because it's so influenced by culture, learning, and specific situations like etiquette rules. It doesn't meet the criteria for a general cognitive ability construct. However, it's acknowledged that social knowledge influences social behavior and could be integrated into broader frameworks of social competence, perhaps as a moderator. It's like the toolbox, but not the hand using the tools.
Got it. The know-how versus the ability. So what does this all mean for us, the learners, pondering our own social interactions and those of the people around us?
Yeah.
How does this sophisticated scientific quest change our everyday perspective? Hashtag, tag, outro.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this deep dive really shows that social intelligence is a complex, multifaceted ability distinctly separate from academic intelligence, and it's one that researchers are working incredibly diligently to measure and understand. The sim represents a significant leap towards capturing these real-world social smarts through its commitment to genuine interactions and robust psychometric development. It's a testament to the scientific effort involved.
It's fascinating, isn't it? While we might intuitively recognize social brilliance in others, that person who just knows what to say, scientifically defining and measuring it is a huge, painstaking undertaking. This research offers a powerful blueprint for doing just that, paving the way for us to better understand and perhaps even cultivate these crucial human abilities in ourselves and others. So here's a final provocative thought for you listening. Think about a social situation where you felt you truly nailed it. What was happening? Was it your ability to quickly perceive subtle cues, a flicker in someone's eyes, a slight tension? Was it your capacity to accurately recall past social experiences, drawing on a mental library of social lessons? Or was it your deep understanding of what was truly going on beneath the surface, hidden intentions or underlying emotions? As you reflect, consider this. How much did your existing social knowledge, the cultural rules, the unspoken etiquette, or even unconscious stereotypes influence your actions in that moment, for better or worse? Consider how this deep dive might change how you observe and navigate your next social interaction, giving you maybe a new level of insight into the invisible dance of human connection. What stands out to you from this deep dive? That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope you feel a little more well-informed, or perhaps a lot more curious about the nuances and depths of social intelligence.